Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the representative from Massachusetts for yielding me the customary 30 minutes, and I yield myself as much time as I may consume. Mr. Speaker, HRES 716 provides for the consideration of 4 bills, including an irresponsible extension of the federal debt limit, and 2 bills that would have questionable consequences for small businesses. I am most concerned about S 1301, which serves as the vehicle for an extension of the federal debt limit until December 3rd. This accomplishes nothing more than kicking the can down the road on something that should be addressed now. Given the majority's insistence on passing several multi-trillion-dollar spending packages, Democrats are now in control of the House, Senate, and White House. They can pass a debt limit extension using their majority, since it's their policies that are requiring substantially larger and earlier increases to the debt limit. In the past, when Congress was required to raise the debt ceiling, the 2 parties were able to negotiate a bipartisan path forward. Democrats simply refuse to work with House Republicans, despite having many opportunities to do so. Instead, they are determined to ram a $3.5 trillion spending bill, checking off every item on their socialist wish list. I am equally incensed that Democrats won't even give the debt limit extension a proper debate or vote on the House floor. Instead, this rule will deem the debt limit extension passed. This is an insult to the members of this body who are being denied the opportunity to fully consider the gravity of extending the debt limit to account for an increasing unnecessary spending. It's absolutely unacceptable to run Congress in this fashion. The second bill up for consideration under this rule is H.R. 3110, the Pump for Nursing Mothers Act. Nursing mothers deserve protections in the workplace, which is why we already have strong laws in place to ensure reasonable break times and access to private non-bathroom locations. This bill imposes a one-size-fits-all requirement for employers and includes penalties for employer violations. Mr. Speaker, our small businesses have suffered through enough new burdensome regulations as they fought to survive over the last year. There's no need to duplicate existing law. The third bill included in this rule is H.R. 3992, the Protect Older Job Applicants Act, which expands the definition in existing Age Discrimination in Employment Act of 1967 to include applicants for employment as a protected class. To be clear, the Age Discrimination in Employment Act already prohibits age discrimination in hiring, making this legislation redundant and unnecessary. Under the scope of this new proposed legislation, employers using common recruiting practices like internships and job fairs could be accused of discriminating against older workers, as older workers are less likely to participate in these opportunities than young Americans entering the workforce for the first time. This bill is just a murky expansion of the Age Discrimination in Employment Act. The only impact this legislation will have is on the number of lawsuits brought against American businesses. Finally, Mr. Speaker, the fourth bill up for consideration under this rule is H.R. 2119, the Family Violence Prevention and Services Improvement Act of 2021. The Family Violence Prevention and Services Program does critical work to support victims of family violence, and many of my colleagues and I support reauthorizing this program in its current form. Unfortunately, this is another example of the majority working alone to draft legislation rather than working in a bipartisan fashion to put together a bill we can all support. Mr. Speaker, I am particularly concerned about a provision in this bill that could allow funds from this program, funds that should be going to support victims of violence, to be used for abortion services now that the Hyde Amendment was stripped out of the annual appropriations bill. This is obviously troubling, and we cannot allow a pathway for taxpayer dollars to fund abortion. Mr. Speaker, there is much to be concerned about in these 4 bills, most troubling of which is the temporary increase to the federal debt limit, which is happening for no other reason than the Democrats' own mistakes. They have worked alone on everything else. They have chosen not to be bipartisan to resolve the issues facing our country. Instead, they have chosen to push through partisan proposals while kicking critical issues down the road. I urge my colleagues to oppose the rule and the underlying bills. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I reserve the balance of my time.